All right, welcome everyone. My name is Monica McCubry and I am the Wildlife Education Specialist with the Nebraska Game and Parks Commission here in the Lincoln office. And I am really excited because I really love fall. But the most important part, I think, in why we are all here today is October is Nebraska Reptile Month. So I've always liked reptiles as a kid, ever since about third grade when my teacher told me that Komodo dragons didn't exist. I've always been like, it like lit a fire under me and was like, okay, we need to bring light to reptiles and that they're cool and they have really neat benefits and we need to appreciate them more. So last year we had Nebraska Reptile Day. This year we took it a step further and made it Nebraska Reptile Month. So we got a proclamation from the governor declaring it as Nebraska Reptile Month. So every Tuesday in October this year, we are going to have kind of a snacks and facts, the lunch hour learning about reptiles. And then on the 21st, we're going to announce our reptile contest winners for our art contest. And so there's a lot going on this month. Hopefully next year with COVID, we can have more in-person events, but this is kind of what we got this year. So thanks for joining us, everyone. Like I said, I know the lunch hour is hard to get away, so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here, and we're going to talk about reptile teeth. So grab your snacks and let's learn some facts. All right, I'll share my screen here. Maybe. All right. So today we're going to be talking about reptile teeth and how they eat. So this is a really neat subject for me just because there's a lot going on today. So just let everyone know, if you have any comments or questions, I would love to hear them, but just make sure that they're on topic and I'm sure we won't have an issue. Just letting everybody know that I am by no means a reptile expert. I would like to be one someday, but I'm not quite there yet. I do love science and I do a lot of research. So if you have questions that I cannot answer, I will find someone that can answer those for you. All right. I'm sure we all know what a reptile is, but I do want to kind of give a little background information just for those that maybe don't know a lot about reptiles or kind of have forgotten. Most obvious thing about reptiles is they have scales. If you look at any reptile, no matter what it is, they're going to have scales somewhere on their body. They are also dependent on external heat sources. So the sun, a rock, the pavement, something. Unlike mammals and people, we can make our own body heat. Reptiles, unfortunately, can't do that, so they have to get it somewhere else. They are also vertebrates. A lot of people kind of forget that, especially in snakes because of the way that they move and how they kind of twist and form their body, but they do in fact have a backbone. They have a lot of those things that make them a vertebrate. They also use lungs to breathe. Most of the reptiles in the world, they lay shelled eggs. Not all of them, like our garter snakes, even here in Nebraska, they will give live birth, but a lot of them will lay eggs. Reptiles that are alive today in Nebraska include lizards, snakes, and turtles. But obviously that's not all of them. There's tortoises, there's lizards out there that we don't have, there's geckos, there's crocodiles and alligators. But we have kind of a broad diversity here in Nebraska even. All right, so skulls and teeth. When we talk about their skulls and teeth, there's a lot going on there. They look very simple, but they're very complicated actually. So looking at a mammal skull, for instance, if you look at your own teeth, we have incisors, we have canines, we have flat crown molars. We do a lot of specialized eating. We also eat lots of different things. Reptiles are a little bit more, they don't have a big variety like we do. So most reptiles, they're going to what we call conical teeth. So they look like cones and they're pretty much all going to be very similar. They don't have a lot of differences. They don't have the molars or the incisors or the canines. They're pretty much just all similar all the way around. But there are exceptions, always in biology, there are exceptions. So venomous snakes, they're going to have fangs. They have specialized teeth that they use to deliver that venom. Mostly when you do look at differences between our lizards and our snakes, they're going to be different in the number that they have, the length of their teeth, and their position mostly. So again, that kind of depends on the species. All right, so lots of reptiles in the world, and they have all different types of teeth. So crocodiles, for instance, they have single upper and single lower tooth row. Snakes have this super cool mandible where they are infused into it, but there's only one row of teeth that's present on the lower jaws. Lizards will have those conical or those blade-like teeth. Depends on some of them, but they also have them towards the rear of their mouth. But then we have our turtles who don't have teeth. None of the existent turtles in the world will have teeth, but instead they have these like sheathy, horny plates that we'll talk about. So they forage in a lot of different ways, and they have a lot of specialization as far as what they're eating. All right, so why do we care about teeth, and why do they even need teeth if they're all the same? So they're a lot less specialized as far as their function, like considering a mammal, but yet they're still very important. A lot of the lizards and the reptiles out there, they are going to be carnivores. So they're biting, they're tearing their food into pieces so that they can swallow it whole. There's not a lot of chewing going on. There are a lot of insectivorous lizards. That's a lot of them, actually. They will crack like exoskeletons of insects to swallow them whole. And then snakes also really specialize in swallowing their prey whole. So they don't have to tear things apart, but simply it's like a conveyor belt. We'll talk about this in a little bit later. All right, so I kind of want to get into a little bit of the different types of reptiles that are in Nebraska and how they eat. We're going to kind of focus a lot on snakes just because that's something that I'm interested in, but also there's a lot of differences when we talk about our snakes. All right, so we're going to talk about turtles first. So we mentioned earlier, turtles, none of the existent turtles in the world are going to have teeth, but instead we call them beaks, or sometimes people call them tomias. If you look in this photo here, this is not a turtle from Nebraska, but it was a good picture where I could see his beak. It is kind of like a bird beak. It's made out of the same stuff that your fingernails are made out of, so that keratin. They have upper and lower jaws, as you can see, that are both made out of that keratin sheath. This helps them basically tear and rip away flesh from other different animals, especially a carcass, or even capture very small live prey. So for instance, our box turtles in the office, they love to eat worms and crickets. And so when it's that kind of horrible crunching sound, but you can still hear it and know that their beak or their tomia is working. But they don't chew. They simply rip and tear or hold the animal still so that it can swallow it. And they're constantly growing. A lot of us, if you've ever had turtles, or if you have turtles at your organization, you know that sometimes their beaks or their tomias, they need to be trimmed, just like your fingernails need to be trimmed. So they're constantly growing because they are alive, but they don't shed very easily. So it's something that you also have to watch out for. All right, so lizards in Nebraska, we have quite a few different types of lizards. These guys have a little bit more specialized teeth. When we look at them, they're kind of categorized into two different types. We have what we call Pleuradot teeth and Acrodont teeth. So Pleuradot teeth, they have really long roots, but they have super weak attachments to the mandible, and there's no socket. So thinking about it, you're probably like, well, how do they stay in there? Well, they're replaced a lot of the time throughout the life of the lizard. The acrodont teeth are pretty much the opposite. They're shorter roots and they have a very firm attachment, but they also don't have sockets. They are actually fused to the bone itself. And if you're thinking about that, well, they probably don't come out. You're right, these are not replaced in adulthood, but they are two very different types of teeth. All right, so lizards are a little different. They have lots of different types of food that they eat. There's some that are insectivores. There's some that eat fruits and vegetables, some that are very specialized in eating crabs. So there's lots of different types of food that they're eating. But what they do, it's pretty much the same thing. They're not chewing and they're not grinding it like we would as a mammal. It sometimes helps them grind a little bit farther down so that they can eat it, but it's nothing like a mammal or a cow would chew on something. Some of them rely on teeth to tear those pieces before they swallow them. Sometimes they're used for defense, or even during mating. So lizard reproduction, a lot of the times the male will latch on to the female and bite them using their head or their neck. That's one of the reasons why they have teeth as well, is to copulate and to mate. And again, depending on the species, depends on the size of the teeth, and also the number and the shape of the teeth. But also looking at this photo, if you really look closely, you can see those tiny, tiny, tiny little teeth in here. They're very small compared to the size of the animal. Ours pretty much fit us. If we had little like serrated teeth like you would find in a bass or something, that wouldn't really fit us. So it's a little odd with their size of their teeth and the size of the body. All right, so talking about snakes now, we're going to move on to snakes. There's lots of different types of snake teeth, but thinking about teeth first, you also need to know how their jaws work. One of the questions I get asked a lot when I do snake programs is, how do they swallow something that's bigger than their head? So the statistics go that they can eat something about 3 times the size of their head. That would be like us eating a full-blown watermelon, which doesn't really work. We couldn't do it. But snakes, they can expand their jaws. A lot of people have said, well, they dislocate them, or that they take it apart or something like that. That doesn't really work. Dislocation of something means that it's going to hurt or it's going to be painful, and snakes couldn't do that every single time they want to eat. So instead, if you feel your lower jaw, you will notice that you have a single bone, that mandible, that runs all the way from ear to ear. Well, snakes don't have a chin. So you can see in this photo, there's that little space right where their chin should be. So they are able to expand that. So it's really stretchy, and they can also open it very wide and very tall. That is so that they can work their head around their food. And then the teeth will actually move like a conveyor belt, pulling in that food, because otherwise how would they get their food in their mouth? And then if you've ever seen a snake eat something, you might wonder, how are they breathing, or do they hold their breath? Well, if you've ever seen those really awful Anaconda movies with Ice Cube and J-Lo back in the 90s, you notice when these really large snakes open their mouth, you kind of see this pipe on the bottom of their mouth. That's called their glottis, and they open this so that they can breathe and swallow their food whole. So it works double time, and it's very efficient for them. All right, so different types of snake teeth. All snakes will have teeth, but not all snakes have the same teeth. They need them because all snakes, no matter where you find them, they're going to be carnivores and they're eating other animals. So not only is it to move that food down into their stomach, but it's also using it to immobilize or hold their food while they swallow it. So the mouth is kind of structured in a way, like we talked about, it opens wide, it opens tall, and their teeth are facing backwards. So your first instinct, if you've ever, hopefully never and never will, you're ever bitten, let's say, by a very large snake, your first instinct is to pull your hand out. Unfortunately, that's not what you should do. Their teeth retract backwards, so it almost makes it worse. So if for some reason you're ever bitten by a very large snake, push your, wherever you get bitten, your mouth or your hand or your arm back into the mouth of the snake, because then it will release it. So it sounds super counterintuitive, which, again, this is not your first instinct to do, but that's just because that's the way their teeth are structured in their mouth. All right, so there's different types of snakes, and they fit into different groups based on what their teeth or what their fangs look like. So this is called an Apistoglyph. It's really hard to say, but these are going to be like our hognose snakes that we have in Nebraska. Most of the snakes that are in this group are fairly harmless, although if you've ever heard of a boomslang, they are also in this family, which they are not harmless, but they will produce a special type of venom called a hemotoxin, and it destroys your red blood cells. It collapses circulatory system. So it's never something that is very fun to think about, but there are some people, like our hognose snakes, it really depends on the person. There was a guy that was working in a lab when I worked in college that got bit by one of the hognoses, They're not a very big snake by any means. His hand kind of swelled up and it turned black and blue. I've been bit by our hognoses multiple times and nothing's ever happened. So again, it's kind of depending on the structure of your internal body as well. So these guys, they're going to have rear fangs, and I'll show you this here in a second, very far in their mouth. But basically to inject their venom, they will hold their prey and they have to move it with those conveyor belt teeth all the way back to the rear of their mouth to inject that venom. All right, so there's also our Proteroglyphs. So these we do not have in Nebraska. This is going to be like your Elapidase. I guess we do have some of them in Nebraska, but like cobras, your sea snakes, these are the ones that have the fangs like you normally see in the movies. The front ones, they're not very long though. They're not these huge, huge ones that you normally see, but they have to have a lot of pressure on their bite to inject that venom into their prey. So most of the animals in this group, they're going to have the neurotoxins, which will affect your nervous system and also your brain. So most of the venomous snakes in here are going to be things like cobras, the sea snakes. They have the front fangs, which are modified so that they can contract their muscles to their venomous glands. So even spitting cobras, they have fangs as well, so that they can bite and to immobilize their prey. All right, and then we have our Selenoglyphs. We have these in Nebraska. This is going to be like your prairie rattlesnake that live out in western Nebraska. So the Viperdae family. These guys have a pair of maxilla, which are very, very reduced, support their hollow fangs. They're usually folded up in the roof of their mouth, and then when they open them, they come down. These are like the ones you see in the movies most of the time. This allows the snakes to penetrate their fangs deep into their prey so that they can inject a very large amount of venom. However, that large amount of venom is not as strong as those Proteroglyphs. So the cobras versus the prairie rattlesnake, cobras have a little bit more toxic venom than our prairie rattlesnakes. Not saying that I would ever want to get bit by a prairie rattlesnake, but it's still not quite that toxicity like you would see in those other snakes. And then we have snakes that don't have fangs. They simply just have a bunch of teeth in their mouth. This is going to be like your boas, your pythons, and a lot of snakes in between that. So these snakes, they don't have grooves, and they don't have specialized injection veins. They mostly just use their teeth to move the food down into their mouth. These are also kind of the more primitive snakes, like your boas and your pythons. They don't have venom in them usually, but again, there are a few in this family that do, but mostly it's just to move that food down. So here's a really cool diagram that I wanted to show you so you can kind of see in your head, what does this look like? So this is your adders, your rattlesnakes, your gaboon vipers that you see. They have that very, very front fang. This is the ones that you see in the movies. They're very long, they're very scary looking. And then here is this tubular fang. And you can see a lot of people think that the very tip of the fang is where the venom comes out. That's actually incorrect. They have this little groove right here where it comes out almost towards the side or the top. All right, your cobras, your taipans, your mambas, here's going to be their fangs right here. And then things like our western hognose snake that we have in Nebraska, they're going to have these tiny little rear fangs. So still produce toxins, but it's just a little bit different. So long tubular ones, the short tubular ones, and then these guys have a groove fang all the way down, but it is a lot smaller than these other two. All right, so I want to talk a little bit about venom, just because that's a very important part to a lot of our snakes that we have in Nebraska. We have 4 of them that are venomous in Nebraska, and a lot of snakes, this is what they rely on to digest their food. So when we talk about this, there's a lot of different words that are going around. There's toxic, there's venom, there's poison. What do they all mean? So overall arching term is a toxin. It's a substance that has an effect on another animal or another organism, I guess. But venom is used by biting or stinging. So our snakes, our stingrays, even our nettles that we have, they're considered a venomous species of plant. So a lot of times it like chalkboard grinding noise when people are like poisonous snakes. There's only one poisonous snake. We don't have it in Nebraska, but most of the time, 99.9% of the time, When we talk about the toxin of snakes, you call them venomous. So it has to enter the body through that bite or a sting. And then poison is a little different. So if you're touching it, you're inhaling it, you're breathing it, that's going to be your poison. So kind of a good thing to remember is that all venoms are poisons, but not all poisons are venoms. I know that's super confusing, but just know that snakes are, most of the time, they're venomous and not poisonous. All right, so the different types of toxins. There's cytotoxins, which causes structures and malfunctions in the cells. There's hemotoxins, there's neurotoxins, there's cardiotoxins. So there's lots of different types, and the reason that they're named is because of how they affect the body of the animal or the organism that the animal's trying to eat. One thing that we don't want to do is label these snakes as only having this or only being hemotoxic. That's wrong. Venoms are a complex mix of substances and toxins and enzymes, and just labeling one or the other, it hurts in how you treat your bites. So if someone said, I got bit by a hemotoxic snake, it helps if we know what type, because then they can specifically have that anti-venom for that type of snake. All right, so the venom gland, how do they inject this venom? It's actually evolved from this Duveroy's gland. And originally it was used as a digestive enzyme. So it's part of the salivary gland. And then there's a super compressor glandulae muscle. You have to put pressure on it for it to release venom. So when that snake bites something, it has to release it then. It can't just release it on command. So the venom will then travel through a series of ducts in the fang, through the bone, and out to the hollow part of it. And it functions like a hypodermic needle. So very sharp and very quick does it go, and also the hollowness of it as well. All right, so why do snakes even have venom? A lot of people believe that right away it was evolved and developed because they need it for defense. That's not true. It was evolved for digestion and to immobilize their prey. So different types of venom will do different types of things to different types of animals. There's a strike and release. A lot of the times the snake will bite and then coil back and go away. I always say that the venomous snakes are kind of the cowards because they don't have the muscle and they don't have the, I guess, the slyness and the courageousness of a snake that is a constrictor. They have to sit there and wait for their prey to die. An animal that is venomous can simply bite and then go back and then find it later. And they can also strike and hold. There are some snakes that will do this as well. However, they have the problem then of being bitten by something else or getting hurt in the process. All right, so digestion. This is the main reason that venom was evolved over time. It has this huge cocktail of digestive enzymes in it that breaks down whatever that animal's eating. So the venom will start the digestion process from the inside of the prey item. And then the whole idea is that the time is then reduced and then the mobility becomes more quickly. So snakes are very vulnerable once they've eaten something. So they have to kind of wait, and they're not as fast and they're not as stealthy as they normally are. So that digestion really helps pick up the process. All right, and then defense is a huge thing, but we got to remember that venom is very expensive for the animal to make. It does not want to waste it on a non-prey item unless it absolutely has to. So the very first thing, normally when you see a venomous snake, it's usually first thing is to go away. It will slither away from you. If it is feeling threatened or has been cornered or something like that, it usually gives you a warning. It hisses, it flares its hood, it might try to strike a little, or it might rattle its tail. Those are all like a last minute resort, like, hey, leave me alone. But then it will strike if needed. But we got to remember that that venom is super expensive for that animal to make. All right, so just a few quick snack statistics here, snake statistics that I want to show with you, because I get asked a lot, like, which is the most deadliest snake? Which is the most venomous? If you ask any herpetologist, their top 10 list kind of varies. So I've kind of picked what I think is the most which species is the most venomous or deadliest, that kind of thing. So the most venomous, when we look at this, it is the inland taipan of Australia. So we don't have them in Nebraska, but they have an LD50. So this is the lethal dose. This is what we're talking about. So when they look at this, they actually test the venom on a lot of different types of animals, anything from fish to mice to rabbits. And basically it's what amount of venom is lethal at 50%. So when 50% of those animals have died from this venom, what is the amount that it took to do that? It's a very controversial experiment, but it is what they have used and it's what we go off of. So this guy has a 0.01 milligrams of their venom per kilogram of that animal weight. So it's very, very strong. If you ever watched Steve Irwin, this was his snake that he always talked about, the king brown, and then the taipan that he would find. So these guys are actually very docile. A lot of people think that venomous snakes are out to get you and they're aggressive, and they're not. So bites are very rare from the snake, but they still do occur. Death can occur in as little as 30 minutes if bitten by the snake, and they have enough snake venom in one drop to kill about 12,000 guinea pigs. So you think about 12,000 guinea pigs and this small little drop of venom, that's how toxic it is. All right, so which species is the deadliest? I always get asked this too. This one is a little bit different. It might not have that toxicity that the taipan did, but it is about 1/3 of all snake bites occur from this. It's called the Russell's viper, and it lives in Asia. It kind of just looks like a nonchalant snake. It's brown, spotted. It looks almost like a Massasauga that you would find here in Nebraska. But it is the 5th leading cause of death in Myanmar, where the snake is found and a lot of the bites occur. Whereas you think about it, the 5th most leading cause of death in the United States is car accidents. But this snake is mostly responsible for more deaths globally than any other species. All right, and then which one is the most dangerous? This one I picked, the lethal dose 50% or LD50 is only 0.25. A little bit lower than the, I guess higher technically than the taipan, still very venomous. These guys will chase you. They're very aggressive. They have a large distribution throughout Southeast Africa. They get big too, 14 feet sometimes. They're called black mambas. They're kind of a grayish in color. When they open their mouth, they're completely black. When we were in Africa, they were talking to us about these snakes because a lot of the times they will get into weaver bird nests and clean out a nest. But they said they called it the goodbye snake. So if for some reason, if someone ever got bit by a mamba, they said, okay, sit down by a tree in the shade and get comfortable and call your family because it won't be long. So kind of a morbid thing to talk about, but still, that's how much people respect and also fear these snakes. All right, so it was short, but I know people's lunch hour is very important to them, so I didn't want to go the whole time, but I hope that you learned a lot about reptile teeth and how they eat and some venom stuff. So if you liked this, we also have a lot of different resources that you are welcome to use. The Nebraska Game and Parks Education YouTube channel, you can look at the playlist Science of, there's a lot of different stuff on there as well. And then we're also going to start a new playlist for all of these snacks and facts so that you can find them later. The Nebraska Wildlife Education Facebook page and our Instagram page also has really good resources and kind of fun facts. And then also our website, Outdoor Nebraska/wildlife education. And then thanks for joining us, but next week we will be talking about defenses. So reptile venom will probably be in there as well, but it will not be the same information. But how do our animals and our reptiles defend themselves? So everything from our hognose snakes, I won't tell you because I don't want to ruin it, and then things like box turtles, and also some of our other snakes that we have in Nebraska too. So, and with that, do we have any questions? I appreciate everyone taking time today. I'm sure it was a lot of information. I tried to keep it fairly short so that you can all still get your snacks in. So, all right. So like I mentioned, I will put these on our YouTube channel. Give us maybe 24 hours or so, and they should be on. And then we hope to see everyone next week, same time, 12:30, Tuesday, October 12th. All right, thanks everyone.